What's good, everybody? It's Zach. Welcome back to the channel, and today we are finally talking about some bounty predictions. I know a lot of you want me to do another Straw Hat bounty prediction, but I did a video on that a while ago. I might make an update on it in the future, but in this video, I want to focus on the other guys, because besides the Straw Hats, there are a lot of different people that we need bounty reveals from. We got a bunch of new members from the Beast Pirates, some Supernova that should get some bounty raises, and even the Warlords are now wanted by the world government, so we need their new bounties. So today I'm gonna give my predictions on all those people, but first off, the King Pirates crew is now over 34,000 members once again, and for those of you that don't know, we are now locked in on our next big goal at 100,000 crew members. Not only is that a big milestone, but it also allows the channel to get verified, which will hopefully help with some copyright issues in the future. So please, if you're not yet subscribed and you like my content, make sure you subscribe and join us on this adventure. But let's get into these predictions, and I want to start with the Warlords because they're kind of overlooked in the grand scheme of things in Wano, because the Warlords aren't actually involved in Wano itself. But of course, we did find out that the Warlord system was abolished in between Act 2 and Act 3. And in the grand scheme of things, the Warlords are definitely going to be very involved in the story. Not necessarily any of them getting involved by the end of Wano, but I could definitely see that news of the Warlords being abolished and the news about Boa, the Straw Hats should find out about that. And that news most likely is going to impact what Luffy and the Straw Hats do next. So honestly, by the end of Wano, I do think we will get the reveal of the Warlord bounties. The new bounties are already decided. We actually almost found out about them when we were in that intermission. It was a classic Oda bait and switch where they were talking about the Warlord bounties, but then he ended up giving us something even more hype with the Yonko bounties. But anyways, let's talk about the first prediction, which is gonna be a spicy one, and that is Dracula Mihawk. Now, of course, whenever we talk about Mihawk, there's gonna be the Shanks versus Mihawk debate about who's actually stronger. I'm not gonna get into that too much. I think Mihawk is stronger, but when it comes to bounty, power isn't the end-all be-all, because even though I think Mihawk could be stronger than Shanks, his bounty is most likely much lower than Shanks. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to bounty, it's really about how much the world government views you as a threat. Shanks, of course, is one of the most influential people in the world. He's very strong. He's a Yonko as well. Mihawk, on the other hand, while he's very strong, he's kind of just like a solo dude on his own floating in the sea. We still don't really know what his ambition really is. One thing I'm always curious with everybody is why exactly did they become pirates in the first place? And for Mihawk, I think his reasoning is probably very similar to Zoro. He probably went out to sea to search for stronger swordsmen to really challenge himself and become a better swordsman. And I'm guessing that's how he ended up meeting Shanks and started having those legendary duels that everybody was talking about. But eventually, of course, Shanks lost his arms and those duels stopped. And really, besides those duels, we don't know much about Mihawk. At some point, he decided to just become a warlord to go under the protection of the world government. So my personal headcanon is after he defeated Shanks, he became the world's strongest swordsman, and at that point, there was really no challenge to him. So then he decided to just become a warlord and go under the world government so he doesn't really have to deal with the Marines. So now that he's wanted again by the world government, he doesn't really have much influence. He's just ridiculously strong. So because of that, I don't really think his bounty is going to be as high as Shanks at around 4 billion, but because he is very, very strong, I think his bounty is still going to be between 2 to 3 billion. One thing you got to consider is that even before he became a warlord, I'm guessing Mihawk's bounty was very, very high. Mihawk currently is one of the only warlords that we don't even know what his frozen bounty was beforehand, but for him, unlike a Boa Hancock or Buggy or even Crocodile, I think his frozen bounty was very, very high, because he still had those legendary duels with Shanks that even Whitebeard was impressed by. So that alone probably made him a pretty big threat to the world government. Maybe beforehand his frozen bounty was closer to like 1 billion and 2 billion, and now that he's wanted again, I would probably guess he's around like 2 to 3 billion. If Oda really wanted to hype him up for some reason, you could kind of push him to 4 billion, but I really don't see a scenario where his bounty is going to be higher than Shanks, because Shanks kept growing his influence and his crew. With that being said, let's move on to the Snake Empress Boa Hancock, who I think is one of the most underrated characters. I honestly think Hancock is one of the stronger people in the story. She has a broken devil fruit, all 3 hotkeys as well, and of course because of her beauty, everybody loves her and has a good time around her. Which, by the way, if you're having a good time watching this video, drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. But yeah, I really do think Hancock is slept on, mostly because her powers weren't really showcased that much. Her frozen bounty is also just 80 million, which some people might look down upon, but you guys gotta realize she got that bounty when she was 18 years old after just one campaign as a pirate. Literally, when she became an adult, went out one time, the world government was like, okay, we don't want any part of that, become a warlord. And now she's 31 years old, she's definitely gotten stronger and matured in multiple ways. And like I mentioned earlier, she does have Conqueror's Haki as well, and while I'm not gonna get into manga spoilers, Conqueror's Haki is very important, let's just leave it at that. But honestly, even besides how strong she might be, bounty, you also have to consider her influence. She's the Snake Empress and she rules over all of the Kuja, who are all elite warriors. So honestly, I do think her new bounty is gonna be dumb high, like probably closer to 1 billion. I know some of you are gonna think that's really high because it's getting into Katakuri territory, but I think Smoothie's bounty is around 900 million. I could definitely see Hancock being at the same level, especially with the Kuja backing her. I know the bounty seems high, but we can't sleep on Warlords just because they were early villains. And another person we cannot sleep on is of course Buggy the Clown, who is also a Warlord. The Buggy situation I can see going either way. He could either have a really low bounty or it could be really high because he does have a lot of people serving him. Now his Frozen bounty beforehand was only 15 million, so it's not very high at all. And the Marines know that he's not strong, but he does have a lot of strong people serving under him. So you could either have the Marines treating Buggy as the actual leader and giving him a really high bounty, like 400 or 500 million, or maybe they just don't see him as an individual threat, especially now that he's essentially run away from his men. So they could totally keep his bounty at just 15 or just like slightly higher at like 20 or something. So yeah, for Buggy, I think it's one or the other. It's either gonna be 500 million or just 15 million. The next Warlord we gotta talk about is Edward Weevil, who's another stupidly strong person. He's another guy that's just pretty much solo. He just has Bakken with him, but because of how stupidly strong he is, he became a Warlord. Now with him, we actually know his previous bounty, which was already 480 million. And honestly, it should probably stay around that, even if it gets a little bit of a boost, probably only jumps to like 500 something. He's kind of new to the scene and only recently became a Warlord. I don't see too much of a reason for them to give him like a big boost or something. So for his bounty, I think is gonna stay around 500 million. And finally, we have our last Warlord, Bartholomew Kuma, and for him, it's really gonna depend on the story. Personally, I think it's more likely that the revolutionaries did not succeed in rescuing him, which would mean he's either still a slave or he's actually even dead. But if Sabo and the revolutionaries did somehow successfully rescue him, his bounty should be higher than it was. Previously, his bounty was frozen at 296 million. I feel like if he's back in action as a revolutionary army member, it should be probably getting close to 400, 500 million, because now he's fully revealed to be connected to the revolutionaries. He also has all those cybernetic upgrades as well. Sabo is the second in command of the revolutionaries, has a bounty of 600 million. I think Kuma should be just like a notch below that. But moving on from the Warlords, let's get into the Beast Pirates, starting with the only commander that we don't know the bounty of, and that of course is King. Recently, King has been kind of getting bashed because he's not doing too much in the story, but I still have very high hopes for King. King is Kaido's top commander, essentially his right-hand man, and as we know with Kaido, he really values strength, so for King to really be his top dog, there's no way that he's gonna be weak or really underwhelming. There's also the reputation that he gets simply because he's the top commander of Kaido's crew, and based off of the bounties of Jack and Queen, which are 1 billion and 1.3 billion, I'm expecting King's to be around Luffy's current bounty at 1.5 billion. If you really wanted to hype up King, because there are a lot of mysteries to him still, what is his race, does he have an Impel Down connection, but if you really wanted to hype him up, maybe he gets to 2 billion, but I feel like that gets a little too close to Blackbeard, who's a Yonko at 2.2 billion. So honestly, my best guess for King right now is about Luffy's bounty at 1.5 billion, and if it's a little higher, maybe closer to 1.7, 1.8 billion. I think for King's bounty, it's really going to be comparable to the person he's matched up against in Wano. And before I reveal who I think that will be, I will have to say, anime onlys, we're going to get into manga spoilers at this point, so if you don't want to be spoiled, check out this video right here. It's completely spoiler free. But with that being said, I think King's matchup is going to be Marco the Phoenix, who is in Wano right now. And Marco's another person we need a bounty of, and I also think Marco's another guy that's really slept on and underrated. Once again, because he mostly showcased all his powers pre-time skip, and he technically took a loss in Marineford. But I really do think Marco is not only really strong, but I think his bounty is going to be pretty damn high as well. You gotta remember, when Whitebeard was alive, he was the strongest man in the world, and the person a lot of people considered the closest to the One Piece and the Pirate King, and Marco was his right-hand man. And not only that, he essentially took over the Whitebeard pirates after Whitebeard passed away. So honestly, I strongly believe that Marco's bounty is 2 billion. Now, I know that might seem really high, but think about it. Blackbeard beat Marco in the Payback War and then became a Yonko. So for Blackbeard to have a 2.2 billion bounty and Marco to have a 2 billion bounty, I think it will make perfect sense. Now, there was that line of dialogue that popped up in the recent chapters where they called Luffy the highest bounty in his alliance, but I feel like that's only one line of dialogue that could be misinterpreted, so maybe we shouldn't dive that deep into it. Personally, I just don't see how Marco's bounty could be lower than 1.5 billion when Queen is like 1.3 already. So even though we got that line of dialogue, I still firmly believe Marco Marco is sitting at 2 billion for his bounty. And after Wano ends, it might be even higher. But moving on from Marco, let's get back to the Beast Pirates and let's talk about the Toby Robo. Now the Toby Robo should be all pretty close in strength because they're all kind of in the same position. And while I don't expect them to be too different to each other, I do think there's levels to them. And it's not so much in terms of strength as opposed to like how notorious they are. I think Page 1 and Ulti seem a lot younger and they're definitely a newer generation. Plus there's the fact that both of them are already knocked out. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little disappointed by that. But yeah, for the two of them, I think they're probably near the bottom of the Toby Robo in terms of bounty. But I still see them around like 400 to 500 million, like slightly above like an Oven and Daifuku. That range puts them close to Law and Luffy after Dressrosa, which I think is a good range for them. Black Maria I think is in the lower to mid tier as well. She seems a little older than Page 1 and Ulti, but she also doesn't seem as ambitious or crazy as them. So for her, I think like 450 million to like 500 or maybe a little higher seems about right. And then the final Toby Robo member I also think is in this range is X Drake. Now, I don't think X Drake is necessarily weaker than them, but he is part of the new generation. Like right now, besides like Blackbeard and Luffy, who's kind of separated themselves, the highest bounties are Law and Kid at 500 and 470 million. I think X Drake's gonna have a pretty high bounty because he's a Toby Robo member, but I still don't see it quite surpassing Law's bounty, so I think he's probably in that 450 million range. Now with the final two Toby Robo members, Sasaki and Who's Who, I think because they're older, they're former captains, they were specifically pointed out as such, I think their bounties are gonna be a little higher, kind of similar to like a Snack and Peril Sparrow and Big Mom's crew. For Sasaki, I think 600 to 700 million is about right, and then for Who's Who I think is probably the strongest and most ambitious, and definitely the most mysterious Toby Robo member, I think he's the one that's gonna have the highest bounty within the Toby Robo members, probably like 800 and 900 at most, because at the end of the day, he still can't surpass Jack at 1 billion. But now let's jump to the other side and we're gonna talk about some Supernova who are definitely gonna get some bounty raises after Wano. We gotta start off with Kid and Law who are currently fighting Big Mom, and while I definitely don't think they're gonna win against Big Mom, I do think both of them will each have their individual shining moment in Wano. Because both of them are kind of rivals to Luffy, they have to like keep up with him in some way. Luffy's obviously elevated himself to another level and will probably do so even more after this arc. I don't think Law and Kid are gonna get left in the dust, they'll probably actually leave the rest of the Supernova in the dust. Well, of course, besides Zoro, but we're not talking about him in this video. But honestly, for Law and Kid, I can see both of their bounties going to 1 billion or even more. Again, that seems kind of high, but if they do defeat Kaido, they're gonna play a big role in this war. Plus, Luffy's already at 1.5 billion. If they're gonna keep up this playful rivalry, they have to be at least kind of close. Now, I will say, I know some people are still hoping that Kid could somehow keep up with Luffy, but I think those days are honestly over. There's like the slightest chance that maybe he does something huge like killing Kaido, but personally I just don't see it. So yeah, for Kid and Law, I see him jumping up to 1 billion or even probably a little more, and then the other Supernova I see making a jump is Killer. Killer, of course, has been getting a lot of love after he showed off his skills on the rooftop. He's currently fighting Hawkins. I think he's probably gonna win that battle. Now for those of you that have been watching me a long time, I think Killer is gonna die, but in this scenario we're gonna pretend that he does not die. And in this scenario where he lives and defeats Hawkins, I think his bounty could probably jump to like 500, 600 million. Maybe it could be a little higher, like 100 million more or something, but I think like 600 to 700 million is a good spot for him as the right hand man of Kid. Actually, now that we're talking about the Supernovas, I did forget to mention the possibility of X Drake's bounty raising even more, but once again, that's really gonna depend on what happens to his role in the story. Is he actually gonna continue being a pirate, or did he complete his mission as a member of SWORD? I do see him defeating Apu, but even with that, I don't think his bounty is gonna jump too much after Wano. And then finally, for the other two Supernova in Wano, Apu and Hawkins, they're absolute frauds, they're snakes, they're not gonna get a bounty jump. I don't think either of them are gonna end up being able to flip sides and contribute at this point, and I just think they're gonna get clapped by their opponents. Honestly, after Wano, they should both just quit being pirates and get tossed in a trash can. And now finally, we get to our last prediction, who I think is gonna be a Straw Hat, and that is Yamato. If you wanna hear my reasons on why I think Yamato is the most likely candidate to become a Straw Hat, check out this video right here. But as far as Yamato's bounty goes, I think she's another one that's gonna have a very, very high bounty. Not only has she proven to be very strong already, clashing against Luffy and now fighting against Kaido, but you gotta think about her reputation as Kaido's daughter. Once the world government gets a word of that, her bounty is gonna be dumb high. At the very least, it should be 1 billion. It's probably more of a realistic bounty for her, but honestly, I could see it going to like 2-3 billion. I know that'll be a pretty crazy jump, especially if this is her first bounty, but I can totally see a scenario where if everybody finds out about her and like news spreads that she joined the Straw Hats or something, the world government have to slap a high bounty on her just for the fact that she's strong and awesome also Kaido's daughter. So honestly, for Yamato, if I had to lock in a pick right now, I would probably go 1.5 billion. That's it for this video. I definitely want to hear your guys' predictions, so let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, check out this video right here, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!